Hello and welcome to another episode of the Girls for Greatness podcast. I am your host, Delia Perry. You are listening to episode number 143. And today I have Kerri Hummingbird joining me on the podcast. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation, but I wanted to give you a little background about Kerri. So just to kind of give you a synopsis, a quick synopsis before we dive in. Um, Kerri is a soul guide and host of the Soul Nectar Show. She is the #1 international best-selling author of The Second Wave, Transcending the Human Drama, and the award-winning best-selling book, Awakening to Me, One Woman's Journey to Self-Love, which describes the early years of Kerri's spiritual awakening. Kerri inspires people to lead their lives wide awake with authenticity, passion, and purpose that positively impacts others. She catalyzes mind shifts that transform life challenges into gifts of wisdom. And her latest book, already a #1 international bestseller, is called Love is Fierce, Healing the Mother Wound. And in this book, Kerri dives into the most direct path to spiritual enlightenment. My friends, I'm so looking forward to learning from and being enlightened myself by Kerri. So, Kerri, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me on the show, Delia. I'm really excited to be here and see what unfolds.
Yes, yes. So tell us just a little about you, where you're from, and maybe a little about how you got into the work that you're doing now. I know that there's many things, many different avenues we could take with this show and many things I want to try and touch on, but just give us a little background.
Yeah, I'll give you a little nutshell to kind of go into the topic of the mother wound.
Yeah.
So when I was born in Dallas to my mom during the Summer of Love and a man who was all into the Summer of Love at that time, right? Which was
Mm,
free love and exploration and all of this. And my mom was this gal from Midwest Texas, who was raised Southern Baptist. Um, so clash of cultures. And, my mom was trying to figure out who she was, and she didn't think she could get pregnant. The doctors told her she
mm,
couldn't. And then in the middle of that, this bouncing baby angel was born into my mom and my natural father's lives, and they were like ill-equipped to handle this situation. So pretty quickly, my mom realized that, married another man who was seemingly a great guy, but led into 5 years of alcoholic abuse.
mm.
Just physical abuse. He tried to throw my mom off a third-story balcony. He was a very violent person. So my life was very dark from pretty much 0 to 5. And then at 5, my mom managed to get away from him, managed to, get enough money together to get us away from him. And also we got lucky and met dad #3, who was my dad until I was a few years ago. He passed away. And he was just an exemplary person. So right in the foundation of my early beginnings, 0 to 7, which is, everybody knows now, or most people know, that's your foundation of your childhood brain. And that's the patterns that get set there are the ones that carry you the rest of your life.
Mm.
So that was what my brain was, my childhood was. So it was kind of extreme and also, but an opening, because I had 3 different examples of relationship between people
Mm.
that early on got me questioning, well, which one's right? Is it this one where my natural father might have molested me but felt very loving? Or is
Mm.
it this one where this person was violent? Is it this person where, he was a great guy and everyone trusted and liked him because he was trustworthy and likable? So, all of that has to do with women needing to have a man, right? I mean, if we look at it,
Sure.
and needing to stand up for yourself and needing to know, like, tune into your intuition, what's right, what's not right. So my mom did something that many women are not capable of doing, which is leave.
Mm.
She did that for
Wow.
me. It's a huge gift. And she also did another great thing for me. She didn't give me any religious training. Now, I know that some people who are Christian or have other religious training on this program said, but that's not right. She should have given you that. Actually, she gave me a gift
Mm.
because she let me figure it out for myself.
Mm.
She let me go through life with a blank slate, letting life teach me what's right for me.
Mm.
So this is, we're in a process of untangling a whole lot of ideas that haven't worked for everybody,
Sure.
stepping into another whole realm. And this was kind of the story of my early beginnings. Blank slate, questions, 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 not knowing what's true, and having to walk the steps to find out for myself.
Mm, mm. I love that. I mean, that is a gift, in a lot of ways. And I mean, my upbringing was very different. I wasn't given that opportunity, but excuse me, I can see definitely how you can look at that as a gift, being able to have that freedom and that ability to, like you said, let life um, kind of teach you some things, which, is we're all obviously learning, but that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah,
So,
and there's one other aspect of the mother wound that's really needs to be rewired to make that extra juicy and fun, which is that there's like this embedded idea in our culture that says that mistakes are really bad and don't make them.
mm,
And we shrink and we
sure.
constrict, right? Because we don't want to make mistakes. And so actually mistakes are awesome.
Mm,
Because
mm,
like think about it. If you're making mistakes, you're learning. First
mm-hmm,
of all, you knew it was a mistake.
mm-hmm,
That says something,
mm-hmm,
right? That says you something inside of you taught you something and you're like, that was a mistake. Then you were willing to call it out and take ownership of it as a mistake.
mm-hmm.
And then you were able to make a new choice, which is the whole point of learning.
True, true.
So I just got liberated, to from a whole lot of programming around mistakes are really bad. And so I was able to just plunge into life and make all these mistakes. I had this art teacher that I had for many years when I was a young adult. And she said, Kerri, what I love about you is that when you go to the canvas, you just start putting paint on the canvas.
Mm,
She said, so many people are afraid of that because they're afraid of making a mistake. And I said, that's interesting. I didn't know that about myself until she started saying that. I thought everybody could just like put the canvas, just throw the paint on, like see what happens. But apparently that's not so.
mm-hmm.
So I've been really doing my best to communicate what I got from my blank slate, which is make mistakes. It's okay. It's safe.
So true. Yeah, and I think so needed for us to be reminded of, not just thinking myself like, oh, it's such a great message to give to kids, but it's something that I think we ourselves really need to internalize. And I'm a huge believer in that as well. Like not letting a mistake or the things, our mess ups be, become things that we dwell on or things that define us, but rather learning from them and looking at them totally different as almost a gift and a way to springboard into something new or to grow. I mean, I always feel the same way about learning or growing as a human being. Like if you're not growing, if you're not getting a little better or figuring things out a little bit more, or however you want to look at it, then I feel like there's a part of us that's almost dying inside. At least that's how I've felt. And I think that, yeah, those two things really resonate.
Yeah. And it's like, think about like when I was a girl and as a woman, I've got caught up. I've noticed as I pay attention to my breath, I
Mm,
stop breathing. And so
mm,
for anybody who's listening,
mm,
this is a part of the mother wound as well. It's like we actually don't even want to breathe to take up space.
mm.
So afraid of making mistakes. It's like just take a deep breath, claim your space, be in your body. This has been part of my journey is like to show up.
Sure.
And it's okay if people don't like it, right? Like it's
Mhm.
okay if people don't like me or don't like something I'm doing.
Right.
I've got to have me. That's another big part of this healing. And I feel for girls, it's so important to have them be okay with getting messy. I don't know about you,
Mm,
but I was like kind of
mhm,
discouraged from getting messy as a child and
mhm,
playing in the mud or getting dirty. And those things are actually really important because that's part of this whole programming around don't make mistakes, don't get dirty, you know, don't make any mistakes, basically. Like stay in your pristine little container
mhm.
and like
True.
you're some China doll. But actually we need to like break out of that. And if we break ourselves like Humpty Dumpty and fall off the wall, we can put ourselves back together again. It's
Mhm.
okay.
So true. Tell us, because I know some listening in, or watching might be a little confused as to what the whole idea of the mother wound is. I know, like I said, there's so many different avenues and ways we could go with this, but just honing in on that, which I think, is a big piece of the latest book, right? That you wrote.
Yes.
Um, what that means, and maybe even just a little bit about you personally, and how you've had to um understand that and maybe transcend in your own way.
Absolutely. So it's such a broad topic because it touches literally every area of our lives, and not just women, but men too. And so the reason, what the mother wound is this idea that as a mother, we are birthing into being another life, another human being. As we're doing that, as we're gestating this form of this baby, we are giving this baby not only physical things it needs to survive, we're giving it ideas from our own consciousness about what life is.
Mm,
And it's seamlessly happening inside of us as our baby is being gestated inside of us. So it's noticing the nuances of your psychology. It's noticing how you feel inside. It's noticing, oh, this is an appropriate response to that trigger. Like, because babies are taking it all in, they're absorbing it. And little kids too, once they come out, it's the same, it's just on the outside. So everything you are as a woman and everything you believe about yourself is being passed along to your child inside of you. So why is that important? Well, if you don't feel you're safe, you're passing along this implicit message to your baby. The world is really not a safe place. If you don't feel confident in your ability to handle life, you're kind of passing that along to your child. And it all happens seamlessly. And in this moment, many of us who are mothers might be feeling, oh God, I kind of knew that was true, and now I feel even worse about myself. Please just stop and breathe, because this is how it's set up. This is the mechanism that baby chose to come in through you as a starting point into life, into a starting place to learn their soul's curriculum, what I call their soul's curriculum,
mm,
their life project. So for me, I came in through my mom, who was insecure about herself, who felt ashamed of her
mm,
body because of all the programming in her religious upbringing, who was trained to think that women serve men. And so that was like her training. And I was brought into her body with her in conflict about all of that. And so I'm brought in with somebody who was going to abuse me sexually. And my mom had to make a decision to leave him, which is what? Failing at marriage. Because when you make a vow, you're supposed to stay with it for life,
mm,
right?
mm,
And then married another guy. And now what is everybody thinking back in that small town in Texas about my mom?
mhm,
But she's doing the right thing because she's protecting me. She's following her heart and her intuition and courageously making that choice of what's best for her daughter and herself. And all the judgment that would be coming from her hometown, she's just like, I'm doing what's right for me, and you can judge all you want, but I'm doing what's right.
mm,
So I'm born into that space. And so in some ways, my mother overcame some of that mother wound to speak up for herself and to do the right action, to stand up to somebody who is abusing her and to say no. That's hugely powerful.
mhm,
In other ways that she couldn't have predicted, the dynamics between her and this man sunk into my brain.
mm,
So I had my own mother wound. So I'm going to share just one, and this could be a trigger for some people. So I want to just say, so this man would beat my mother if, as a little toddler, I acted like a toddler.
mm,
If I was joyful and playful and silly and was loud and I annoyed him, he would beat my mother. So implicitly there became this my mother wound was like, if I'm myself, my mom is going to get hurt.
mm,
I have to protect my mother, and I have to suppress my light and suppress myself so that my mother doesn't get hurt.
mm,
That was an early pattern. And my first memory is actually from him intimidating me. It was the message, I finally got to it because all this is subconscious. I was like, why is that my first memory? Why is that my first memory of life, this moment of abuse? And it was because the message I told myself was, it's not safe to play.
mm,
So my whole life I've been proving it's safe to play, but being disconnected from the pain of the early trauma.
mm.
So my journey has been to
Mm,
make it actually truly safe to play and experiment within myself. Because I put myself in my own conformity cage, right? To not offend anybody. I put myself in this cage inside of myself, always feeling, perceiving everything going on outside of me and doing my best to bend over backwards and twist up in knots to not create any kind of conflict that would get people I loved hurt. So it's been a process of learning to breathe, as I talked about, like learning to take deep breaths inside my body, learning to give myself permission to be, to just be, to
mm,
take up space, and then to speak,
mhm.
to use my voice. And that's been a process, to learn how to use my voice. Because when I first started speaking, it was out of defensiveness,
Right.
because I was protecting myself. So now I'm learning how to speak softer and gentler and trust and open my heart. And, when I feel the walls want to come up, I'm learning how to put them back down again. Because this isn't really about taking up the sword. I know that
Mm,
there's a strong impulse in me, and I'm sure many women listening, that when you hear these stories, you want to pick the sword up and be like, I'll just go get that guy, like, like
right.
stop
Right.
abusing women and
Right.
children.
Right.
But that's not the answer because they're also wounded. They came out of a mother, they came out of the mother wound as well. Because how can we not? Women have been mistreated for centuries.
Mm,
Of course, we're seeing the results of that now.
mm, mm.
So it's really up to the women and the moms to
Sure.
take ownership of this and heal from the inside out, to be softer, gentler, loving, kind, compassionate. It seems unfair, maybe, that we were abused and now we're the ones that are going to be loving.
Mhm.
But that's kind of how Soul's curriculums go. And that's what I call being an earth mama, is taking up that mantle and saying, I'm an earth mama and that's what I'm about. And I'm taking responsibility for this human drama and I'm going to bring love to it.
Mm. Wow. I love that description. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and for sharing that. I mean, yeah, that definitely makes more sense to me now as well. So one of the questions I had as I was preparing for this too, and just looking through your website and things about your book was that, um, what about the person who's listening and thinks, well, my relationship with my mom was really good and we had a great relationship and I lived a really, um, relatively normal childhood, or, however you want to look at it. There was not a lot of, anything too traumatic going on in my home. Does everybody have something to heal?
Yes, because we're in a cultural paradigm of
Mhm.
women being mistreated and controlled for thousands of years. So that can be a little sneakier to get at, right?
Mhm.
And I will say that there was a long time where I thought my mom was my best friend. And I want to say we're back there again, but
Mm,
from an authentic place, we're
mhm,
we're there now. Like I
mhm,
love my mom. We get along so great, but from a place of authenticity.
mm,
So it's like, I guess my question would be, what do you see within yourself where how are you approaching life? Like, do you stay in a safe container of acceptable choices in your upbringing, or do you take risks?
mm,
Do you put yourself out there? Do you challenge? Do you question? Do you, if you challenge and question, how does it feel when you do that? Is it okay for you to have an opinion that's different
mm,
than your environment?
mm.
Those are the questions I would start to ask to open this up.
Sure.
Because if we stay in our comfort zone, we can keep telling ourselves it's fine and everything is working. There's a huge um, pattern in the human collective, a core wound of repression. So it's an inner repression where we push down how we're actually feeling and we step over it. We
Mhm.
might even distract from it. Like we might drink alcohol. I did that for a number of years. I'm a huge wine connoisseur. I still love wine, but I would use that to
Right.
repress how I was actually feeling. So I would
Sure.
just ask listeners, take a closer look. And it can be uncomfortable because none of us wants to blame or shame our mothers, especially like if you have that feeling of loyalty to your mom, like your mom is just like really been your best ally. The last thing you want to do is like dishonor her in some way. But to move through to the next place in your own development, you kind of have to be willing to ask those questions. And it's not necessarily a conversation with another person or even out about the other person. It's really more about you and how, like, what inner mother did you create based
Mm-hmm.
on your mother?
Mm-hmm.
And is that inner mother actually serving you and supporting you to be your greatest, to be your greatness? Or is she actually telling you, hold back, don't rock the boat, keep the peace? You know, there is no
Mm-hmm.
keeping the peace. I want to say, for anybody who's heard that and you're like, you just like, I'm just keeping the peace. Peace goes through conflict. The path to peace is conflict. Conflict with appropriate tools like learning self mastery, conflict can lead to diplomacy, and then that can lead to peace.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't just skip over the conflict to get to the diplomacy because it's a false diplomacy. It's not really true. And that's why resentment happens over time, you know, when you're a pleaser. I can only speak to this because I've totally been a pleaser, a conflict avoider, a peacekeeper.
So me. She just hit the nail on the head. Seriously, I mean, that's a huge part of who I am, or how I would even describe myself is, I do not like conflict. I do not like to rock the boat or make anyone feel uncomfortable, or, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't speak up at times, but it's usually around the people that I'm most comfortable with, my tight circle at home or my closest friends. But yeah, that's a really difficult one
And
for
that's a
me.
huge domestication, I want to say. So let's just like peel the layers back on that and reveal it.
Mhm.
Women have been trained to be docile and obedient.
Mhm.
So when we start to get up against that edge, it takes something big to pull us through it. So for me, it was my son.
Mhm.
When I started seeing how my son was being treated,
Mm.
I was like, that's it. I can't not do something.
Mm. Sure. And I remember reading about that as well. That was a really critical point for you in moving forward in to your life and into the work you're doing, I think. And that's amazing.
It's so important. We have to advocate. Like my mom advocated for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I can't, like her mother's heart pulled her forward through the conditioning to be obedient.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So I want to say, like, that's why I always call out to moms. That's why it's about the Earth Mamas for me. It's like, come together, Earth Mamas. Trust your heart. Your heart is telling you. And this isn't to make anybody wrong.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to make men wrong or other people wrong. I'm just saying, if you know something's not in alignment with the highest good for the people you care about, then it's in you to speak it up,
Mm-hmm.
to have the courage to say it and to put a
Mm-hmm.
boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we
So
have to
true.
learn to do as women because the world is in a spot right now that is looking a little dire,
Mm-hmm.
and we are the ones that need to speak up before it's too late.
So
That's
true.
who we are. We're the mama bears, and we
Yep.
need to come together.
So true. It's so true. I loved one of the things I loved that you mentioned, I know, on your site was, and it really made me stop and pause, and maybe some of you that will be listening or watching, I think this is obviously really deep work, and you have to be willing to dive um, really deep, I think, to truly move forward in a profound way in your life. That deep inner work is some of the most difficult work I know I've done. And some of the things that you listed off that I just thought, are things that we so often struggle with, like self-sabotage or competition or depression or, you know, broken relationships. I mean, all these things that you listed. I mean, I think it's so easy for us to sweep those things under the rug and to think there's other causes for that, or I just have to get my act together. I just have to try harder. I just have to, I mean, because I was on that wheel, hamster wheel for a long time in my adult life. And, you know, it's really difficult, but it's something that I really encourage people to do, is to take a step back and start to evaluate where those patterns come from, where those habits come from. Why do you think the way that you think? Where is that been ingrained in your head? And that was a big stepping stone for me, I know, in my own life. And I'm sure, Kerri, you could speak a lot about that too.
Yeah, I think that I feel the energy that you're bringing with it, and I have had that same energy with it. Like it feels dense and heavy, and like, oh, I got to go through this process now. But it's like the human kind, we're all also suppressed through this frequency of seriousness
Mm,
and suffering.
mhm,
And that is what keeps us from wanting to go move through maybe to the next place to take responsibility for even more, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to take responsibility for even more. It's already hard enough.
mhm,
But actually, when you do that, it starts to get lighter. Like it lightens up. That's like
mm,
enlightenment. It
mm,
enlightens you. That's why I said this mother wound is like the fastest path to enlightenment because it's one of the deepest, darkest wounds. So as we move through it and embrace it, allow it, accept it, forgive it, have compassion for it, understand it, it actually enlightens us. And it can become like more I don't want this to sound flippant, but for me, it sounds kind of like it feels like a game now. It's like, oh, let me find another one of these things that is a pattern that has been handed down to me from my ancestry, who thank you so much for all you gave me, because if it weren't for my ancestry, I wouldn't be here. And if it weren't for my ancestry, I wouldn't be as strong as I am, because they have pieces of the pattern, they have pieces of the
right.
solution that they gave me. And some of that stuff doesn't work for me. So as I liberate myself from those things, I get more empowered. And when I
Mhm,
get empowered, I feel more confident. I feel more capable. I feel more like hope. I feel more faith. And then because I'm not mired in my own human drama that I'm trying to avoid, because I'm actually, unwinding it, unpeeling it, looking at it, taking ownership of it, and clearing it, I start to have more capacity to help others. I have greater capacity to listen to others because I listen to myself first.
mm,
And when you listen, that's diplomacy. You can come to solutions without conflict when you listen. But the path again is through that facing the inner conflict, facing that first, and then really being present with what's showing up so that when you're speaking with somebody, you're saying what you actually mean,
mm.
not just what you want it to be. Because, like, rose colored glasses queen right here, like, I had to take them off. Like, I mean, I had to be real about what I actually felt.
Sure.
And, denying it doesn't work. I tried that for 20 years, by the way. That's not a good path. Like
So
denying it and
true.
pretending and avoiding and like, it's okay. Anytime I hear somebody say, a woman say, it's okay, it's fine. I'm like, we're stopping right here. What's really going on? Like, nope.
Yeah.
Let's just stop and actually check. Is it actually fine?
Right.
Because if it's
Right.
not, let's talk about it.
Right. Yeah. That's great advice. So great. Um, I'm going to switch gears really quick because I know I wanted to touch on this one aspect too, because we talked about the mother moon, like our relationship with our moms, our upbringing, all of those things. And now, um, those of us who are also now parents, which I know are a lot listening in and watching, myself included. I have a teenage daughter and a 11-year-old son. So it's a huge undertaking, right? And I'm feeling that more now in my life than I ever have. And I I think, one of the things that I loved that I read, is that a lot of this is about empowering our own kids to respect, honor, and love themselves. I want to be sure I got that right. And I think that is such a vital job for us as parents, um, especially in this day and age. And I talk about media on here a lot. And a lot of that is just because I'm really wrestling with it, with my own kids. And the messages are flying at me so quickly. And I know they're flying at them so quickly because, they're just surrounded by so much, so much more than when, obviously we were kids and phones weren't even in existence. So um, I'm just curious, like your take on that, and how we, you know, start to do that, and then just the whole idea of being celebrated as a mother for who we are, and maybe looking at our role in that way, um, which I think is something a lot of us struggle with because we're constantly, myself included, um, I think beating ourselves up for things we did, said, mistakes we made, mistakes, which we know aren't true mistakes, but
Mistakes are awesome.
yeah, and I've made a ton of them. Um, every day, I'm just like, oh, but you know,
Well, it's humility,
so yeah, it is.
Delia.
It
It's
is.
really about being a humble human.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think being a parent, being a mother, I haven't been a father, so, I can only
Yeah.
speak to being
Right.
a mother. So, but being a mother to me is the most humbling experience because
Hmm.
they are also our teachers.
True.
Our kids are our teachers and we are their teachers. And
Mm.
this is a concept that I had to really get because it's not just the age of the body. Like the body is a certain age. Like I'm a 52-year-old woman. I have a son who's 22 and I have another son who's turning 19. So in the body, that's how old they are. But how old is their soul? Hmm. Because they have different age souls. Okay. And
Mm.
that piece, because sometimes a lot of these kids, anybody who has a unicorn child, and you know exactly what I mean when I'm saying that right now, the one that doesn't come along, the one that didn't do anything you wanted them to do, the one that wouldn't conform, the one that was like, nope, not gonna do
Mm.
it, that's not for me, that child is
Mhm.
really challenging from the paradigm that I came from, which was that
Mhm.
I was to get love, I
Yeah.
was the A student,
Mhm.
I was the performer. I was the one that did everything that they told me to do to be perfect on the outside. And on the inside, I was like wondering if I was okay. These kids know themselves on the inside and let the whole outside fall apart.
Hmm.
That is so challenging to have those two dynamics meet
Hmm.
because
Sure.
and that's like my generation is now facing, I'm 52. So my generation now is facing like this widespread conversation about narcissism, right? Well, what is narcissism? It's like trying to look perfect on the outside because you're still trying to figure out what the world wants of you. Like it's not an inner conversation. Like I know who I am and I'm good with me. It's faking and pretending, right? And that's why social media pictures, I stopped doing the family like smiling pictures because I felt like at some point I just got to this place like I just can't do that anymore. It's not true. Okay. Like my family was struggling. I was going through a spiritual awakening. I was going through all these challenges and I just had to get real and honest. That's what I mean by being a humble human. So
Mhm.
right as I was going through that, like when I left their father, my youngest one was going into third grade and my older one was going into middle school. That is the worst time you would think to have that divorce happen. Our older son is going into middle school, which is like
Mhm.
such a huge transition. It was his catalyst. It was actually his catalyst. There's been so many things that happened in the relationship dynamics with his dad that I just so angry, like, how could you treat your son that way? And so angry, 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 and like, this isn't right. And it's what my son needed.
Mhm.
My son is a rocket ship. Like, he's one of these unicorn children. He looks like a total mess on the outside because he's not doing what we think is success. And he knows who he is on the inside. And everything he's doing has a method to the madness. It's all intentional, it's purpose. So, like, wait and see him at 40. Your jaw will be on the floor. And so I already know that about him. So what I had to learn to do was to take the criticism and whatever else that was happening on the outside and the projections of, doomsdays, projections and all that was happening because he wasn't conforming, and go, that's nice. Thank you for sharing. And I know who my son is and I trust his heart. He's going to have the lessons he's going to have, and I'm his biggest champion to have them. And besides all that, I'd rather him discover those messy things while he's still in my house and I can help him than when he gets out in the world at 30 or 40 and drowns in that stuff. I'd rather him face the uncomfortable things in my home where I can help. So I wasn't that mom that tried to prevent all the mistakes. I didn't. I just let it happen. I gave him space to make his own choices. And I stayed alert. I was watching. This is the dance, right? It's like I'm watching what's going on and I'm present and I'm feeling if there's an opening to ask a question.
Right.
And if they're open to listening, because if they're not, nothing you say is going to do anything. But they have to figure it out for themselves. Otherwise, they get into the world and then they come back home. And I think that's why the previous generation had all these kids at home, like till like 40, because they weren't allowed to make mistakes.
Right. Yeah. That's a really great description. And I'm sure many of you that are, hearing this are, that's really making sense, because it's making sense to me. I mean, I may not have a child that I would describe as a unicorn child, but I think just what you've said about providing space for our children to figure out who they are and to know that it's okay for them to make mistakes. And I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. And one of the things that she said popped in my head just about how she always tried to communicate to her kids that they may not feel like they belong anywhere else, but they always belong at home. And they need to have that safe space and to know that, they're accepted, they're loved, they're all of those things at home, by the people who, care so much for them. Because I think a lot of kids are lost in that. That's not the case at all. They don't feel that at all.
No, they don't feel that because the parents are lost in our generation's narcissistic pattern. So in order for us to truly be great parents, we've got to face our fear of failure. We have to face our own fear of making mistakes and not being perfect. And we have to embrace a humble human inside and admit that we make mistakes and admit we don't have all the answers and admit that, hey, life is really kicking my butt and I'm doing my best and I'm showing up. So we also have to flip our mindsets. Like, so in my groups, I've been doing this thing, and can I do it here? This is for your audience.
Yeah.
Okay, so this came through last week, and so I've been doing this with my groups, and they really like it. So this is a rewiring about the idea of mistakes, because up until now, mistakes have been terrible and sinful and going to send you straight to hell and are awful, right? I just like, don't make them.
Right.
So I want everyone to just get your arms free. Get your arms free. Take a breath. We're going to do a victory. We're going to do the victory thing.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to do that. So here's what we're going to say when we're doing the victory thing. Mistakes are awesome.
I love it.
Claim it. Just do it. Do it one more time.
Mistakes are awesome. Love it.
And just like that victory is going to help you rewire. Can you feel the energy changing? Celebrate mistakes for yourself.
That's awesome. Love that. And I could feel that energy shift.
And so anytime you make one, go back and be like, mistakes are awesome.
Yes. That's right. That's right.
Celebration.
So true.
Not a problem.
So true. Yeah. You're right. I love that, Kerri. So my final two questions, there's so many other things I could dive into, but I know for sake of time, I got to keep this where it is. We'll just have to do this again. Go there. So tell me 3 words that best describe who you really and truly are.
Well, I know on the inside, I came here to be peace. So I know I am peace.
Mm,
And I've always felt joy inside my heart. So I know I'm joy. And I'm delight.
mm, love those. Great words. And my final question, tell me one way that you strive to embody greatness.
I live my life as a ceremony.
Hmm.
So every day I live my life as a ceremony, as a devotion to this planet, to God, source, creator, universe, whatever your word is, all the words, the same oneness. I live my day in ceremony and devotion. And I find that that really helps to ground me in gratitude
Mm,
and keeps me present so I can notice what the divine is telling me is important today.
mm, beautiful. Truly beautiful.
There is a ceremony in the book too. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah, it's the Healing the Mother Wounds sacred ceremony, and it's something you can do on the earth. And if it's hard for you to get to the earth,
Mm.
you can create like a little dish and put earth in it and have it inside. But it's there's right inside the Love is
Oh,
First book
that's
for
really cool.
everyone.
That's awesome. Kerri, thank you so much for being here. This has been so wonderful. I definitely feel enlightened, and I know that those of you who are listening and watching feel the same. There's just so much wisdom from what you've had to share, and I just really appreciate the work you're doing in the world. I think it's unique. I think it's so needed. I mean, I often say that to my guests, but I really truly believe that what you're doing is something special, and you've shed light on something that I know for myself, um, is something I think I really needed to hear, and something that I definitely can consider and implement in my own life. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delia.